Howdy folks, welcome to the Scannell Agenda. This is show number 78 entitled NASA Fisheries Congress. There is no such thing. Today's date is February 5th, 2018. Well, the point of it is I've got this designed for a Fisheries Congress, but people don't get it that what we're doing nowadays with our fisheries is futile and backwards. And it's just like, what are we thinking? We're not doing asset management. We've got all these boneheads in fisheries that are political boneheads. They call themselves scientists. How long do you think they would last on a Cassini team that were real scientists? Not a minute. They'd be ushered right to the door. I mean, you know, a scientist given the mission of improving the fisheries and reforming the fisheries we'd be far ahead of the game if we hired these NASA people. So it's like, can you close that door out there? Thanks. I'm getting a lot of noise.
All right, do you want to start from the top?
No, just keep it going. Getting a little distracted here. Okay, the Congress of Marine Scientists and Technicians is a project that I have on my table. Now this is something that I guess people don't get it, but we have political management of fisheries and not scientific management of fisheries. So if I say to you NASA, then you might get, okay, I get it. We want to have scientific management of fisheries. Okay, now do you get that we need scientific management of fisheries? Well, we have Woods Hole over there. You know, Woods Hole has basically got nothing to say, nothing to do with this asinine fisheries management system that we've got now. I know they play in a role, but it's just nuts. Just nuts. Any banker, accountant, businessman would do asset management and would want to measure the stocks properly as it relates to the habitat, measure the habitat and the stocks, because your stocks are carried only by the habitat. Now, it's kind of a dovetailing of stocks and habitat. They're both kind of one and the same. But if you think of the bay scallops here, okay, the bay scallops are living in a marine habitat. Let's just say usually that's eelgrass. So they're in an eelgrass habitat, and there are all these components of that matter. So if you have fishermen that don't understand that the eelgrass matters, and believe it or not, there are a lot of fishermen over the years that I've known who don't understand that the eelgrass really does matter. It's huge. It's a huge component of the fisheries, and it's something that has to be, you know, really gotten down to. You got to get down to brass tacks, and you got to realize that the eelgrass is a major component. You know, and I asked the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies for the 100th time if I could speak to them about, you know, the habitat destruction. I was at the boat show and they were there with their booth. I keep asking them. I keep asking, can I speak to you people? You know, I guess if you don't like liberals, you're kind of not going to get the audience, because this environmental thing is a liberal thing, right? Well, I mean, if you had to draw a pie chart and say, whose fault is this that we don't have codfish? A big part of that would be your liberal environmental establishment, because they are the same, part and parcel of the program Democrats, program people, and they made a deal, and the deal was that these guys have been fishing for years, and you leave them alone, okay? You know, stupid Just stupid. This was when I was a kid, all this was going on. So somehow that got cast in cement with all these liberals that we had to go overboard and respect all these traditional ways of fishing, which are wrecking the whole outfit here. Just terrible. The scraping of the bottom, you know, it's good to a certain extent in certain areas, okay? It's called cultivation. Then you go over into destructive fishing, which is why we don't have codfish, basically. And that's also why the whole bottom ground is getting sour, and it's happening from south to north. And it's why they don't have lobsters in Buzzards Bay and Southern Waters Block Island area. There's very few, the lobsters are drying up, and it's probably from the red tail disease, the amoebic disorders. It's not a disorder, it's a composting effect from the imbalances and the habitat destruction. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand all this stuff that's going on. I think there's a lot of people like me who do get it, and a lot of them are with the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, but I guess they feel kind of helpless. I don't know what their problem is. Like they did the deal years and years ago, and now we've got this system that is set in cement, and we can't do the pick your own strawberries system, which is the market quota system. It's green fishing, you know. So you're subsidizing your green fishing, and you're subsidizing the artificial reefs and the windmills with the artificial reefs and everything else. And you're pouring in a lot of organics into the ocean, and it's just, your production is mushrooming. But hopefully you won't be touching that until we're ready. You know, because I do advocate a 7-year, 80% shutdown. 7-year, 80% shutdown of the fisheries. Now, these NASA Fisheries Congress would definitely go along with that if they were getting paid to make the ocean produce. If Trump said to these guys who were not fisheries, they could use the fisheries people, but basically you don't want the fisheries people because they're no damn good. They've proven they're no damn good at their job. So if Trump came in and said, I want NASA people, these are scientists, I want them to use the people that are no damn good, these fisheries people. And I will say the exception to the rule is down in Milford, Connecticut. National Marine Fisheries Service Aquaculture Labs down there. Those are great people. See, there's a disconnect between these good people in the fisheries who, I remember years ago, the tautog were so hammered because all the offshore boats came inshore, and the fisheries people are like, you know, watching all this happen. They couldn't do anything because basically politicians and fishermen go into a room, and there's no room there for a scientist. And it's been this way for years. So I would say to the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, let me speak to you people. You know this is wrong. Why aren't you letting me speak to you? I've asked them 100 times. You know, I don't know. I guess if I'm not a real liberal, I guess that's it, right? These are liberal environmental groups. But I don't see it as liberal, conservative. Now, if you had that pie chart and you had the liberal problem people, then of course you'd have the conservative problem people in the mix. That would be my sort of, I'm not going to attach myself with these people. I'm sorry, I take it back. Okay, I may be a little bit right of center, but I'm not stupid. These are stupid people, some of these Republicans who have said over the years, well, let the businessmen run the show. These are business people, so give them what they want. And this is how the Magnuson Act went, you know, because it was like, we're going to give business these fishing rights, and then, of course, business will know what to do. Business, these are business people. Well, they do know what to do, and that is wreck the ocean. That's what they know what to do. Because if you don't understand this, your conservation is tied in a reverse manner to your current fishery system. In other words, in a reverse manner. What do you mean? Well, if fishermen, and these are permit holders, I'm not talking about your poor deckhand who doesn't have a chance to be a true fisherman and own the boat and own the license, which is a tragedy. Okay. Your fisherman permit holder, and we talked about this on another show with, all these permits now coming available because of the problem in New Bedford with the egregious violations. Now, as I was saying just yesterday, I think it was, we got to tie these permits up immediately and strike while the iron is hot here. Tie these permits up right now and put the permit holders rather, on a cash cap allowance. In other words, what they bring in and sell, their limit is cash money and not, in other words, a dollar amount and not poundages. And then you couple that to programs, I hate to say it, where one boat could have 40 different workers and be working on an artificial reef at the same time, doing a little fishing, maybe taking out the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, etc., doing some drop line fishing and keeping these boats busy, keeping the boats busy, yes, but not wrecking the bottom. So on this pie chart, getting back to the pie chart here, you have your liberal idiots who have signed on and are still signed on to, and I got to get everyone unstuck from this bad system, which includes liberals and conservatives. Okay, the thing to do is to strike while the iron is hot and get us off of these old systems and onto new systems, which is a market quota system, or pick your own strawberries system. So we need scientific management to do this properly and to orchestrate the floating marine laboratories, get them going. You're going to need some tax money. But all the while, I keep saying, if you do your reforms, they're going to have payoffs. And in fisheries, the payoffs are huge, humongous payoffs if you leave the codfish alone and you keep growing the codfish with the artificial reefs. And this is a businessman's perspective. I'm a businessman. My dad was a businessman. This is just stupidity. It's got nothing to do with business as to wreck these fisheries, with the exception of, as I was trying to get to this point here, I'm sorry, I'm running around chasing my tail. The thing of it is, the ties to conservation aren't really there. It's a reverse situation. If I was a permit holder and I orchestrated the same things I'm talking about doing, which is rebuilding the fisheries habitat, well, then you would be watering down your valuable permit. You'd be essentially inviting new boats into the fisheries because you'd have lots of fish and you could afford to have more fishermen, more boats coming in. So this is anathema to these people with the permits. They want very exclusive permits to do the fishing. They want to be the fishermen. See, the few fishermen, that's what they want. And then when they're retiring, they'll give it to their children and they'll have a $3 million permit, but they will want to, and this is subconscious too, they will want to keep the fisheries down. They'll want to keep hammering the habitat. You're thinking, oh, this can't be true. It is true. But it may be mostly subconscious. The other thing, the other factor is fishermen, and I know fishermen pretty well, by nature are zoned in on fishing, believe it or not. They're not zoned in like I am on cultivation of habitat. Just to illustrate that, there were some guys that were fishermen on Nantucket that I knew who fished in a way that was very environmentally destructive. It's as if they couldn't see the fact that they were just they would tow and tow and tow with their dredges, and then when they felt like it, they'd haul back. Now, for me, I was hand hauling my scallop dredges for about 4 years. I went from the machine to hand hauling and then back to the machine. But when I went back to the machine, boy, I knew much better about how to fish. And this was from Alan Holgate, taught me a lot. He was an old timer. Now, the Scientists Fishery Congress would be comprised of these floating marine laboratory people in the towns and in the region and with state participation. I would say the states have to play a supporting role to federal and a supporting role to local. And what we have is an extra layer of management that doesn't fit, doesn't belong there. It needs to shift gears, basically. State waters, federal waters, local waters. Okay, what we need is local, federal, international. Those are three. And that is about where it's going to be with the market quota system, hopefully. Anyway, the floating marine labs are critical. And this Cassini Fisheries Challenge, I call it, in this little thing here, is about the NASA people being empowered. These are real scientists. And these were the people that did such a good job on the Cassini project, which is one of NASA's greatest triumphs, I think. Now, we could have a better fishery outcome with Cassini engineers and with this Congress of Marine Scientists than we ever think of having with these boneheads. Bonehead fishery, political fishermen, you know, they don't know enough to stop wrecking the habitat. This is what I want to get through to the liberals of Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, who have over the years, over the many, many years, have said no to me. I can't speak to them. So I think I got to get them lined up, whether they like it or not. And my Republican fellows, I got to get you folks lined up. What are you thinking? This is a disaster. This is a policy disaster. 50-50. Half of the Republicans' fault, half of the Democrats' fault. Let's call it what it is. It's just a disaster. And I don't know, it's like we're not pushed to fix it. Come on, this is ridiculous. I guess the hook fishermen have been given some money to come up with a plan. Someone gave them 100 grand. I'll give you the plan for nothing. I've been doing that here on the show. The plan to have oysters so that the oysters can filter the dirty water. Well, that's not a stretch for me to come up with that plan. I've already come up with it. With the market quota system, you can keep a lot of oysters as your brood stock, and you have control. See, the real backbone of the current system is everything's chaos and out of control. Because as soon as you have some oysters, let's say, then they're going to get noticed, and then they're going to get wiped out. We're not in a building role at all with fisheries. We're still in this foraging. If something materializes, as a matter of fact, where did it go? I have some, oh, here they are. Now, my wife and I were walking the beach at Cockle Cove, and I got some beautiful looking shells that were washed up. These are beautiful. And I could see a few years ago that some oysters were getting their start over down there at Red River area. These are some oysters that I just found like a week ago. I found a few of the bay scallops, and I found a few of the sea scallops. This is a sea scallop, it's small, a little bigger. But what impressed me was, you know, we did have a start on these oysters here. Look at this beautiful. That's a beautiful oyster. right there. Market size and everything. How would you keep the oysters on the bottom and keep them doing their job? Well, you do that with the proper system. And you do that with scientists in charge, not fishermen in charge. Because, we've got to go get the oysters, got to go. You can't stop fishermen from just agitating to the point where they're going to get sick. They got to go catch the seafood if they see it. That's what fishermen do. It's like the scientist is like not in the equation right now. It's silly. You're saying, oh, well, that can't be true. It is true. The scientist is not in the equation when it comes to fishery management. Any scientists that you have would probably get fired if they talked a little bit of common sense, like what I'm talking about, building the oysters up, leaving them alone. You know, oh, that would be like, get rid of him. So these Congress of Marine Scientists and Technologists, you'd have to empower them to run fisheries. Now, there's nothing stopping a fisherman from working at a marine laboratory, floating marine laboratory. That'd be good to put fishermen in that mix. But you don't want to put fishermen over and above the smartest people on the planet when it comes to knowing the animals right here are your aquaculture people, especially your hatchery people. Your hatchery people, first of all, they got to go to school and learn the basics of science in the marine environment. And a lot of fishermen, and myself included, I mean, I've taken a few courses at Cape Cod Community College. You know, I'm not a scientist, but I think I can do scientific level work on the economics, but any business-minded person could probably pull that off if they started young, as I did, and start working in earnest on these issues, as I did. So what do you say to a systems change of a NASA nature in fisheries? Now, when I say NASA, now you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, it's like, you think that, what are you thinking? I don't know. It's like the fishermen somehow know what to do. Everyone has their own self-interest. So yeah, fishermen know what to do for themselves, okay? So I'm talking about public resource management. And when I got published, I was asked to publish my system. I was asked by all these educated people, can't you publish so we can, you know, have a starting point? So I did. And that was in the year 1999 that I put it all together and I wrote it all up and I published it, such as it was. It drove some people crazy, the way I write and the way I think. These are educated people, and if I say something like, you know, the current system is rubber stamp-ish in nature, that wouldn't cut it with an educated treatise on the issue. You don't talk like that if you're a PhD, which I'm not. So every marine laboratory would have people that would be chosen by virtue of a ping pong ball. They'd be selected. They'd each be doing their turns. And you'd have a lot of people at a floating marine laboratory that worked there. And they would be chosen in a non-political way. These are people in the aquaculture industry with the floating marine laboratories. And they would all take turns and go to the Congress of Marine Scientists and Technicians. And they'd be making the judgment calls on kelp, on eelgrass, on sea scallops, on bay scallops, on lobster, on the balance of fish, and leave the fish alone, or you can catch a certain amount of fish, and how you're going to catch these fish, all that stuff. And what system are you going to use to incentivize the green fishing? This is all economics here. It's not rocket science. But when I say NASA, maybe you'll get it. I'm just desperate to have you people get it. And you don't get it. And we have no cod, and if we have a few codfish, it's going to be a blip. We're going to catch them. But what we really need to do is work with Canada and explode our codfish population, and then work on having good lobster hatcheries, codfish hatcheries, because these are the talented people you want, you know, in Europe too. Let's not leave Europe out of it, because, you know, Iceland and codfish, and Norway, these are all codfish areas. But the massive tonnages that we should be catching now, I kind of forget what codfish looks like, honest to God. I haven't seen codfish getting thrown around. When I was a kid, you'd have boats coming in and they'd be throwing the codfish all over the place, and these are some big, you know, codfish too. They are basically, I mean, and I've only once in my life been ass deep, as they say, up to my hips in codfish. That was on the Ruthie B. Just once we really slammed them, just that one time. But that was how boats used to fish. They'd get into them and they'd load up, but no more. But we can bring those days back with the 7-year, 80% shutdown, okay? All the while building your fisheries with the floating marine laboratories, with the habitat protections and the habitat improvements, tire reefs, all kinds of floating marine laboratory-based reef projects. Because if you have a floating marine laboratory, it doesn't have to be a hatchery. It can just be a marine laboratory that is engaged in employing 200 or 300 people at a time, putting together these artificial reefs. And then you add organics to the mix, and you have reef systems that allow you to basically dump in like forest litter and branches and leaves, etc. And these will translate into biomass tonnage, which then will translate into codfish. So that would be over this 7-year period. And then in the last year, you might have a jubilee where you actually do some landings of the seafood. That's my vision, would be to let the ocean rebuild and build the ocean up with the proper methods, and using disabled people and prisoners, and everyone else in this country could be put to work doing this. There's just so much work that I've got designed over the years to get this accomplished. So I do want to get all this work published, such as it is. It's just notes, basically. I want to get my notes published. All right, so help me out there. Maybe the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies could help me out. Maybe not. Maybe they'll say, no, yeah. You know, they're liberals. I'm not a liberal, so I guess that's why they've always said no. Because I got in a fight with the pond killers on Nantucket. Those are the liberals. But asking you liberals, you know, what have you accomplished? Okay, what have you accomplished? Nothing with fisheries. So thanks for watching the Scannell Agenda.